All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is our career exploration series. My name is Erin Cantrell. I am the director of the Donito Career Center and Alumni Relations. And today we have with us Dr. Bethany Poe, LMSW, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. Hi, everyone. As she said, my name is Dr. Bethany Poe. Um, and thank you, Maria. Today I'm here to talk about veterinary social work. Okay, here we go. So before I get started, just a little bit about me. I am the Associate Director for Operations and Education at the University of Tennessee's Veterinary Social Work Center. Uh, my background, I have a degree in psychology from Middle Tennessee State University, and then my master's and PhD in social work from the UT College of Social Work. And I've been involved in veterinary social work since 2006 in some form or fashion. I actually got into it as my second year master's internship and just really never left. But otherwise, I have a background working in interpersonal violence, so domestic violence with victims, with perpetrators, also in child protective service, mental health education and suicide prevention. I was briefly the HABIT, which is Human Animal Bond in Tennessee, Middle Tennessee coordinator for UT, and also working in veterinary social work. And I also have certificates in addition to veterinary social work in trauma and financial social work. So that's just a little bit about me. And these are my boys that you see on your screen. So the one on top is Nash and the one on bottom is Knox. They are brothers. And yes, they are named after the cities of Nashville and Knoxville. Because at the time I was living around Nashville. My office was in Nashville, but I was also working for UT Knoxville for the vet school in veterinary social work. So my life was divided between Knoxville and Nashville. So that's where they got their names. And they're not in here at the moment, but they may make an appearance. You never know. So those are my boys. Yes. Love orange kitties. All right. So by the end of our time together, I'm hoping that you're able to define veterinary social work, that you can identify the 4 areas of general veterinary social work practice, and be able to identify at least 2 places a veterinary social worker might be employed. As I go through, if you have questions, I am able to see the chat, so feel free to put them there or just flag me down. Either way, I'm pretty flexible. Okay. So before I get started, if you could just put it in the chat for me, I'm just kind of curious how familiar people are with the concept of veterinary social work. So if you just give me a number 1 through 5, 1 being I have no idea what it is, all the way to 5 being I should be teaching this. Okay, so we got 1s and 3s. That's good. Okay, so that's a fun place to start. Okay. Okay, so veterinary social work is a specialty area of practice of social work that addresses the human needs that arise related to the human-animal relationship. Okay, another way to think of it is it's a way of addressing the human needs that come up between social work and veterinary medicine. Okay, so if we're thinking about a system of humans and non-human animals, there are challenges and needs on both sides. So this veterinary social worker deals with the human ones. And because of this, it also makes veterinary social work inherently interdisciplinary. Because we are functioning in this system with humans and animals, we have to have professionals on both sides to make sure the whole system's needs are being met. So that includes human welfare professionals, animal welfare professionals, and public health, as well as we also get things like lawyers and other professionals involved as well. So we get this question a lot. So why is it called veterinary social work? So veterinary social work is a space where professionals can come together about issues related to people and animals. So veterinary medicine is a complementary profession to social work. So just like we function on the micro, meso, and macro levels, so do veterinarians. Most of us typically think of veterinarians being in a local vet clinic or hospital, but the reality is that you can find veterinarians in all sorts of fields. So they do work on the front lines in clinics and hospitals, but you also see them in industry. You also see them in regulatory bodies. You also see them in government. So they are a complementary profession for us, and uh, we can go hand in hand helping people and animals. You can also see here that they have a similar approach to their profession. So when a veterinarian finishes school and becomes a veterinarian, they take what is called the veterinarian's oath. And you see it here. So being admitted to the profession of veterinary medicine, I solemnly swear to use my scientific knowledge and skills for the benefit of society through the protection of animal health and welfare, the relief of animal suffering, the conservation of livestock resources, the promotion of public health, and the advancement of medical knowledge. I will practice my profession conscientiously, with dignity, and in keeping with the principles of veterinary medical ethics. I accept as a lifelong obligation the continual improvement of my professional knowledge and competence. And this is from the American Veterinary Medical Association. So you can see here that in many ways, it parallels what we value in social work, our ethical principles. So that commitment to service and social justice, dignity and worth of the person, the importance of human relationships, and integrity and competence. So overall, we work really well together. And so veterinary social work was founded in 2002 by Dr. Elizabeth Strand, who was our founding director here at UT Knoxville. And so she consciously chose the term veterinary social work to embody this relationship and the similar approach to our professions. So what is the role of veterinary social work and veterinary social workers? The thing is that in our societies, there are a lot of differing opinions, and that plays a role in human-animal relationships. So there's differing opinions about the quote right way to treat animals. So that's things like, do we eat them or not? Do we hunt them or not? Is it okay to do animal testing? If so, what kind? Right. On some smaller scales, is it okay for your dog to sleep in your bed with you? Do we dress our dogs up in clothes? And so all these things that people have lots and lots of different opinions about. And we also have different opinions about the right way, quote unquote, to live a human life. So the veterinary social worker is striving to promote and enhance human well-being and relationships. And we do that by attending to human-animal relationships. So our goal is to meet a client where they are. So that can look a lot of different ways, but we're meeting them where they are about their beliefs about animals and the way they should be treated or not. And a lot of people are very attracted to veterinary social work because they have a love of animals. And that's great. But the reality is that we are focusing on the human. So if your focus, you really have a love of animal welfare, that might be a different path you want to take. But we're focusing on the human. However, it is a hopeful byproduct that by creating more humane attitudes and practices towards people, we can get more humane and attitudes and practices towards animals as well. All right. So, veterinary social work has 4 areas of general practice. Sometimes you'll hear them referred to as the pillars of veterinary social work. One is not above the other. This graphic could be shifted to see any of those on the top. And you'll also notice that each one has micro and macro interventions. So the 4 areas are animal-related interactions and experiences. This includes things such as service animals and animal-assisted interventions, as well as a person's experience um, as a child with animals. Maybe they have memories that are affecting them that happened with their animal, or phobias of animals, harm to human and animals. So this is different types of violence: animal abuse, interpersonal violence, child abuse, elder abuse, animal-related grief and bereavement. So typically people think of pet loss. So, and this can be because of the death of an animal or the other loss of an animal. And something we call intentional well-being. We previously called this compassion fatigue and conflict management, but we changed the name to make it more broad because there are other things that are included. Okay. And we're going to spend some time going through each one of these, talking about what's included and different careers or job parts that can include these topics. So we typically go to animal-related grief and bereavement first because it's some of the earliest work in the field. So we started seeing this in the 1970s, 1980s, particularly in Colorado, at Colorado State University. So helping people deal with the loss of their animal. So the thing is that all around the world, and including the United States, we have a very high rate of pet ownership. So here in the United States, it's about 66% of American households own a pet of some sort. But despite that, pet loss is still a form of disenfranchised grief, meaning that we don't necessarily have the understanding and rituals around the loss of a pet that we do, say, for a human. So if we lose a person, we expect people to take time off work. We expect there's to be some sort of memorial or funeral process. We expect people to be reacting. And when it comes to animals, we don't have those same societal expectations overall. Okay. And so this can be very confusing for people because the reality is, for some people, their grief reaction to the loss of an animal is actually more intense than what they've experienced because of the loss of a person. And this can happen for several different reasons. Um, a lot of people have very close relationships with their animals. This may be a creature that they're with 24 hours a day. And typically the relationship is less complicated than with a person. So you may love a human, say a parent, for example, and be very, very sad when they're pass away, but you also may have some complicating factors there. So with an animal, a lot of people just experience what they consider unconditional love, and then it's gone. Okay. We can also have some other factors, including things like euthanasia. So that's not something that comes up with the loss of a human, typically. Um, so having to make the decision about when their animal passes away or dies can cause some complicating factors that people can use some support. So we also have the issue of anticipatory loss. So this is when you know that your animal is going to be passing away soon. either because of age or illness. So working through that, when you're expecting them to pass away and potentially having to make those quality of life decisions. We could also have ambiguous loss. So if your animal runs away and you never know what happened, you don't know if they're still alive, if they were ever okay, if they weren't. So having to deal with that never knowing what happened. And complicated grief comes into play quite a bit. So we can have relationships with animals that mean different things. So this might be my spouse's dog, and my spouse passed away. And now I have this connection with this dog that also reflects that loss. And so when this dog passes away, I'm also now dealing with the feelings of when I lost my spouse or my child, or could be we have a lot of losses that have built over time. So there's a lot of work to be done in grief. Okay. So what does this look like? So one thing we spend a lot of time doing is psychoeducation. So for a lot of people, it's really confusing to them that they're having such an intense reaction about the loss of a pet. They don't know what to do. They don't know that they feel like they're going crazy, that this isn't normal. So we do talk a lot about what are normal signs of grief, and that pet loss is a loss. And what can we do? Pet loss support groups are very common. Here at UT, we run one online monthly that's open to anyone. And there's different structures. Some groups are run with a plan. It's a set weekly plans, and they're closed groups, and it's more structured. Others are more open and that anyone can attend, and there's not like a curriculum or anything like that to go through. It's more just sharing and experiencing together. One-on-one sessions. So for some people, they need a little bit more intensive work. And that is something we also do here at UT. And helplines are also very common. So that people can reach out and just talk about what they're experiencing. And sometimes that helpline leads to attending the support group or the individual sessions. And sometimes people just wanted to talk that one time, either way. But this is a very common role. Organizations such as Lap of Love have a lot of different resources. There are associations related to animal pet loss and bereavement. And a lot of veterinary clinics now are offering these types of services through social workers. Okay, let's move on. I don't see any questions so far. I am sorry. It is starting to be spring here in Tennessee, and my allergies are reacting. I'm sorry if I sound a little gravelly. Well, there we go. All right. So the next section is one that a lot of people are not super comfortable talking about. It's known as the link between human and animal violence or harm to humans and animals. So this concept is just that violence doesn't occur in a vacuum. And if we see one in a household, it's very likely that we're going to see the others. So if we see an animal being abused, it's very likely that we're going to see children if they're in the house, or potentially domestic violence or elder abuse. Oops. Has some timings on that apparently. So this also has in common that all of these topics, they're interrelated, and they have laws and organizational policies that related to all of them. Okay, so again, that micro, meso, and macro level. Okay. This is another interesting way to think of it as animal abuse as a red flag. So if we see animal abuse is happening in the household, it's a red flag that we need to be looking at other things that are could be happening in that family system. Okay. So overall, just some things to think about. They vary depending on the issues that we're talking about. So if we're talking about intimate partner violence, the presence of a companion animal affects the decision to leave. So for some clients, if they can't take their animal with them, they will stay in that dangerous situation. And that's a problem because we know from research that the longer someone stays, the more dangerous the situation is. And so social workers can definitely help with safety planning and brokering resources and figuring out housing that includes the client and their animal. When it comes to children, we kind of have two different areas we need to think about. So one is if they're witnessing animal abuse, either in their home or community, versus if they're perpetrating. So are they committing acts of animal abuse or harm? And if they are perpetrating, we need to kind of take a look at what's happening and why. And when it comes to older adults, self-neglect is a big issue. And if someone is self-neglecting themselves, they'll often be neglecting their animal as well. Animal abuse and neglect by caregiver. So very similar to the intimate partner violence. Sometimes caregivers will use the client's animal as a way of controlling that client. So, um, you know, give me your social security check, or I'm not going to take Fluffy to the vet, that kind of thing. And animal hoarding. So I do want to be clear that anybody can be an animal hoarder, but statistically, it does seem to be middle and older adults, and often typically females. So just things to be aware of. Okay. So what does vet social work look like in this area? So veterinary social workers can be in domestic violence shelters, working in victim services, and helping clients determine how to best accommodate their animals. So there are different ways of doing that. A lot of shelters do offer uh, sheltering of pets as well as the client. So the Sheltering Animals and Families Together program is wonderful. Rescue Rebuild as well. Other options can be things like fostering networks. So if a domestic violence service provider and an animal shelter have a relationship, they can figure out different ways of housing animals while the client is in shelter. Grants are available from Red Rover and the Purple Leash Project. Okay. So that is very common, but we definitely need more of it. Counseling. So whether that's for the victims, or survivors, things they've witnessed, things they've been put through, being able to process that. And we also need counseling for the perpetrators. So there is a model called Anacare that works with people who have been charged with abusing animals. And we need more of that. And definitely developing laws and policies. So things like orders of protection. There's about 33 states, I believe, off the top of my head, where a domestic violence survivor can include their animal in their order of protection. There are states where animal abuse and child abuse and elder abuse by law needs to be cross-reported between agencies, but it's not across the country yet. Okay? So there's still a lot of work to be done in these areas and great opportunities for social workers. Any questions? Not seeing anything so far.
I did have a question, if it's okay to
Yeah,
just like pop in.
yes, it's great.
Yeah, sorry, I missed the very beginning. I was eating the messiest taco in the world, so I didn't want to be like on camera. Um, but I know there's like a nonprofit here in Austin that provides like affordable or free or like low cost like veterinary like services to animals for like folks that are either like experiencing homelessness or like some kind of disruption or just folks that have like lower income. Would that be
Mhm.
considered like an area of like social work or like advocacy work? I was just curious.
Yes, absolutely. So, and that's a really growing area. So, and that actually fits really well into this one. We would typically, it's called access to care is the kind of broader spectrum, and that does fit into this animal-related interactions and experiences. But it also applies in all the areas. So, um, but yeah, so I think it's called Austin's Pets or something like that. Yeah,
Mm.
but
I'll
yeah,
have to I'll
so
have to look it up and I'll pop it in the chat when I find it.
yeah,
But
thank
yeah,
you.
that's really cool to know that that's also like an area that's like being explored and
Yeah,
grown.
yeah. And the thing is, from a social work perspective, we're involved with the people. So helping people connect to veterinary services. And we're focusing on that human relationship. And so if that person is seeking services for their animal, we're meeting them where they are. Okay. So, okay. Very good. Any other questions? All right, questions. All right. Okay, so this area is typically an area that gets a lot of attention. It's kind of the more fun area of veterinary social work. So animal-related interactions and experiences, and it includes all the things. So, like I said, it includes animal-assisted interventions or animal-assisted services, which there's a lot of terminology in this area that can be very confusing because it's kind of nuanced about what's actually happening with an animal. But basically, it refers to when we're utilizing an animal or partnering with an animal to generally meet some goal. And whether we're doing that as an animal assisted activity where an animal is just present and we're not really doing an intervention necessarily, but we're visiting. So down here in the corner, you see police officer with that's Polly is the dog. He's a habit dog. And we're just de-stressing. We're chilling. We're relaxing a little bit. Okay. So it's not really therapy, it's just an activity. We're visiting. Animal assisted therapy is more where a person is incorporating animals into their therapy to meet a goal. And so with children, that can often be we're working with an animal to um, potentially work on communication, or occupational therapists will often use animals, kind of help motivate folks, uh, throwing balls and that kind of stuff to help with hand movements and that sort of thing. So there's lots of different options there. Animal assisted education, these are often reading programs. So the idea being that children read to the animal. So here at UT, our version with Habit is called Rough Reading. It's RUFF, so rough. And our volunteers go into elementary schools and the kids read to the dogs typically. And it's just another experience to get them excited about reading and reading out loud without judgment. Because the dog doesn't, provide criticism. They just listen. But encourage the child that they want to have their turn with the dog and encourage them, the dog really likes it. They pay more attention if you read with emotion and feeling and all that. So they practice more, which is great. This area also includes emotional support animals and service animals. Those are different things. So, service animal is a dog or miniature horse in the United States. If someone tells you they have a service chinchilla, no, they don't. Okay. And these animals are task trained to help someone with a disability. Okay. An emotional support animal it can be any species, domestic species, and that animal has a letter from that person's mental health support because that animal needs to be with them in their housing because it helps them deal with the symptoms of their mental health. Okay. It only impacts housing. It used to impact housing and also allow the animal to be in the cabin of the airplane at no charge. That is no longer the case. So now this only impacts housing. Additionally, while a service animal can go anywhere the general public can go, an emotional support animal cannot. Okay. So they are distinctly different. That's just one of my little soapboxes. And another way is humane education. So this is similar to animal-assisted education, but the idea of teaching about kindness and treating animals well to build things like empathy. Okay, so be very useful for children. So this is just a fun infographic that I really like because it does talk about the differences between service dogs, therapy dogs, and emotional support dogs, because they can be very confusing. And you can see, and people tend to use the terms interchangeably, and they're really not. So our therapy dogs are the dogs that are our social butterflies. We need them to really like people and be comfortable going to lots of different people. Service dogs and emotional support dogs, those are intended for an individual, and they really need to focus on that individual. And again, service dogs are task trained, so they do something, while emotional support animals are just there for emotional support. Okay, so what does this look like? So definitely, as we mentioned, access to care could definitely fit into this animal-related experiences and interventions. But a lot of program development and evaluation. So whether this is you're developing a animal-assisted activities program where volunteers go into different agencies and work with and visit. So clients in a nursing home or a hospital or a school, or you're developing a therapy program. So how we use assistance dogs, facility dogs in the therapeutic process. Okay. And the reality is these can be in lots of places. So hospitals, schools, courts, prisons, in your private practice, almost anywhere really. But it is important that you do, collect data and evaluate your program. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay, no problem. And the last section is intentional well-being. Right. So a lot of people don't really realize this, but there are, let me phrase it this way. So a lot of the general public, when we first think about veterinary medicine, we tend to think about you get to see cute puppies and kittens. And a lot of folks don't realize that there is a lot of stress, a lot of burnout, and the suicide rate within the veterinary population is higher than the general populations. So that is something we want to work on. And there is research to back it up about what impacts their, you're welcome, what impacts veterinary mental health. Okay, so giving bad news. So bad diagnosis, passing away of the animal, cost, right? Just managing adverse events. So whether that is an animal that is crashing or is much more badly hurt or sick than we thought, or this is someone screaming in the waiting room because they aren't getting the service they think they should be, or the bill is too high. Also related to that is interacting with difficult clients. Right? So this is something that unfortunately veterinary teams have to deal with a lot, in person and on internet, social media as well. Okay, working in teams can be challenging, balancing work and home, financial issues. Veterinary school is very expensive, so a lot of veterinarians are carrying a lot of student loan debt and then having to run a business of a private practice, and handling ethical dilemmas. So this comes up a lot because there are treatment options in some cases that are possible, but a client cannot afford. So dealing with that distinction. Can also be things like, we can keep the animal alive, but the animal is going to be in pain the rest of their life. So is that ethical? Making those decisions. When the veterinarian feels it's better for the animal to be euthanized and the client wants them to live no matter what. Right? Or vice versa. The client is saying, I want this animal euthanized, and the veterinarian is saying, we can treat this very relatively easily. So, or this is a healthy animal. So these decisions definitely cause a lot of stress and lead to poor wellness in veterinary medicine. So we can have very high stress levels. Okay. So related to this is compassion fatigue. Okay. So all of the caring professions are prone to compassion fatigue. That includes social workers. So I don't know how your programs go over it or not, but I hope they do, because we're all prone to it. And it can show up in lots of different ways. So in some cases, it can look very much like PTSD and have PTSD-like symptoms. Experiencing grief, depression, or anxiety can also show up as addictions. So alcohol, drugs, food, sex, shopping, all of it. Can we contribute to relationship problems outside the workplace, but as well as working with people in the workplace. And we can start hearing folks say things like, if I don't do it, no one will, nobody cares as much as me, or nobody else can do it the right way, as ways of avoiding taking time off or taking time for self-care. Okay. And as I mentioned before, we used to call this portion of our model, specifically compassion fatigue and conflict management. And we broadened it in 2022 because the reality is it's not just compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is definitely a part of it, but there are other things contributing to this overall concept of wellness. So people are experiencing burnout. People are experiencing trauma and lots of different types of trauma. So vicarious trauma, secondary traumatic stress as well, and moral distress. So that issue of what I have to do versus what I feel like morally I should do when they don't match. And so we added intentional well-being because we wanted to focus on this overall concept of well-being that is including all these things, but also things like, yes, conflict management, but communication and policies and laws and suicide prevention and all these other things. And we include the word intentional because it doesn't happen out of the blue. You have to do something to make it happen. Okay. So what does that look like? So we teach in our veterinary schools. Almost all veterinary colleges have some sort of mental health professional now, which is great. Most of them are social workers. And we spend a lot of time working on skills. So working on client communication. How do we talk with clients? Providing teamwork skills, learning about conflict management and mediation. Lots of communication skills just in general, but also grassroots organizing. There are a lot of organizations now that are focused specifically on veterinary mental health. Mentor Vet, Not One More Vet, Veterinary Hope Foundation. All of those have our certificate program graduates involved in some form or fashion, which we're very proud of. And of course, individual counseling or coaching. Okay. So veterinary social work is growing by leaps and bounds. As I said, we were founded in 2002, and you can see that we've merging fields, joining two professions. So we are interdisciplinary. So you find us in both NASW and JAFMA. And there's more and more research coming out about the benefits of incorporating these practices into our veterinary fields. Okay. And you can find more and more jobs that are being posted that are specifically looking for a social worker in a veterinary setting, which is great. You'll see social worker, veterinary social worker. Some places are looking for like well-being directors, that social work is a profession listed in that. So the jobs are becoming much more common, although there's still a whole lot of room for being an entrepreneur. Okay. There is an International Association of Veterinary Social Work now. You can find information at iavsw.org. And it's a space for any professional who is interested in this field. Okay. And they provide lots of great CE opportunities, networking opportunities, and opportunities to really make a difference and implement changes in the field. And just a little bit of information about our educational opportunities here at UT Knoxville. So if you're considering getting your master's, we do have an option where you earn your master's and the veterinary social work certificate at the same time. You have options for in-person and online. And you can also go, if you already have your bachelor's, there's advanced standing, full-time or part-time. Okay, so lots of cool options there. And basically that certificate, you use your elective within your master's. They're focused on vet social work, and your second year field or concentration year field is related to vet social work in some way. And if you already have a master's or you're not looking to go to UT Knoxville for your master's, we also have a postgraduate. So this is for licensed mental health professionals that are already in the field. It's a continuing education certificate, and it consists of online modules, online workshops, and a 250-hour Keystone project that implements veterinary social work in some way. Okay, so you can find more information about this on vetsocialwork.utk.edu. There's a training tab, and all that information is there. So if you have questions about the certificate programs, please reach out to vswcp@utk.edu. And anything else vet social work related, feel free to reach out to me directly at bpo2@utk.edu. So thank you so much. What kind of questions do you have?
Hi. I was going to ask, what would be some more examples of like macro social work in the veterinary social work field?
Good question. So policy practice comes to mind. So but one of the first things I actually did going into vet social work was to help Tennessee pass the law to make cross-reporting, or excuse me, orders of protection happen. Pets and orders of protection. So we still have a lot of room for program development as well. So well-being programs, domestic violence programs that work with animals. Yeah, so those are kind of the main ones. What else?
Well, and then I'll ask kind of like a more of like a personal question, like what do you find most rewarding about this work? Like what is like the thing that you smile about like at the end of the day?
Oh gosh. So I've been doing this for a long time. And I think one thing that always makes me smile is that people will almost always connect over their animals. So that's one of the easiest ways to build rapport. And um, so people are always willing to tell you about their animals, and it just gives you a place to start from. It also really makes me smile about how enthusiastic people are when they hear about vet social work. So I coordinate our certificate programs. I meet all of our students, and I don't know how many times I've heard, "This is so cool. I didn't know this thing existed. This is just what I wanted." You know, so I think those are my favorite things.
Yeah, not really a question, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to come talk about this. I kind of had the same reaction like when I saw this opportunity pop up. I was like veterinary social work, like that sounds really cool. And I have a really close friend that's in the middle of like vet school applications and has been really
Yeah.
passionate about that. So it's been really cool to learn about from that side. And also to learn about the way conversations about mental health are happening for like people that are in the veterinary world or like going into that. So I didn't realize or I didn't like really think through like all the emotional toll of like doing veterinary work. Yeah, so it was really cool to learn a little bit more about what you do and about this field.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so that's really great that you have a friend going into vet school. We're always happy to hear that because we need more veterinarians too. So
Hmm.
that's another thing that adds to the whole impact is that there is a shortage of veterinarians and veterinary technicians in our country. So yeah, it just makes things harder. But yeah, and that's the other thing too that I get excited about because yes, you can definitely there are people that this is their whole career. They work in a veterinary clinic. They are doing this day in, day out. But the reality is that this can be incorporated into whatever you're doing in whatever setting that you're practicing social work. Because as I mentioned, almost 70% of our country households have a pet. Okay, so,
Hmm.
if we don't ask about the animals, potentially we're missing a really big part of that person's world. So think about it. If you're working in assisted living or a nursing home or a medical facility, and you're talking to a client and they're just not wanting to do that treatment that the doctor keeps recommending, or they don't want to go into the hospital, they don't want to go into assisted living, their animal might be why, you know,
Yeah.
like, or the same thing with domestic violence, if you're talking to somebody and, uh, if we don't ask about the animal, potentially we're missing something that they're really worried about. And, we would like to kind of assume that somebody would bring it up, but sometimes they don't until you
Yeah.
ask, you know? So whatever you're doing in social work, the animals matter because you're working with a person that animal matters to them. And we didn't even get into like farmers and lab researchers and wildlife rehabilitators and
Yeah,
zookeepers.
I was gonna say, I imagine that would be a really cool area to explore a little bit too, because like I grew up in the more rural area where a lot of people had animals, and I think the attitudes can be different, but there's still like a lot of care there, and it's really important to people, their animals.
Yeah,
Yeah, it'd be something interesting to keep exploring.
yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you
And there's a
again. I
lot.
have to hop out, but oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. You're good.
Oh, I was just gonna say I have to hop out, but it was really, really nice to meet you and hear you speak. And I also was gonna pop in the chat. I found I think it's a nonprofit that I was thinking of called Emancipet. They actually have places all over the
Okay.
US. I didn't know that. I thought they were just Texas. But
Okay.
they are a cool nonprofit that provides care. So
That's cool. And that was not the one I was thinking of. Okay. So
yeah,
I learned about a new resource. It's wonderful.
we love to hear it. All right. Well, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
All right, Dr. Poe, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm super excited to get this posted on our Donito Center YouTube page so that our students and alumni can check this out at any time. Thanks again, and yeah, hopefully we'll have also some links that we can share with the students if they're interested in like the certificate programs. And yeah, well.
Cool. Thank you so much.